Mike Kehoe took office as the governor here in Missouri, and he signed 6 executive orders. Basically, they are all around fighting crime and immigration. So first, he's creating a regional team to hunt down folks with outstanding warrants. He's also got 2 that focus on increasing police budgets and pay. There's also some on immigration training for police officers, because I think they're going to become more of an arm of ICE in some ways, it looks like.
So it seems.
And also requiring immigration status on all arrest reports, as well as a review of the parole system in Missouri. So first of all, what do you think about the focus generally on crime and immigration as the first thing out the gate for Kehoe?
First of all, I want to be clear. When we break down most of these things, they're not actually about crime. They're not actually about public safety or reducing crime. And they acknowledge that when we really start pushing back on some of these, when they'll start off by saying, oh, well, look at these crime rates. We're trying to address them. We're trying to make things better. And then you point out the problems with that. And they say, well, it's not actually about crime. It's about making the jobs easier for police, or it's about making sure that police are doing ultimately what Republicans say. And I think that right there is what most of this is about. And even when they talk about increasing pay for police officers, that may be a real conversation that needs to happen. We've got, just like all of our state workers, police are probably underpaid and understaffed as well. But they aren't willing to actually provide the money to do that. Just like teachers, they'll raise pay of teachers, but they don't actually give money to the schools and local districts to pay those teachers more money. Here, they'll say, Kansas City, St. Louis, you have to pay your police more.
That's right.
And they will say, even though it's already over half your budget, you have to spend more on police and not on these other things that you believe prevent crime up front, or make people healthier, or, clean up trash and roads, or whatever it else that St. Louis needs to do or Kansas City needs to do. You have to do it. An unfunded mandate that St. Louis and you guys have to pay, but we're going to act like we did it because we're the state and we said you had to. Well, that's not actually solving anything. It's not actually helping anything. It is putting on a show that they are about tough on crime, law and order. It's some of the same show that they're doing with immigration. They had all those hearings last year on immigration that they did throughout the election year across the state, where they had hearings about immigration, and they were trying to make it about, look at all this crime associated with immigration. But at each of these hearings, the folks that came to testify were like, well, actually the primary problem of crime with immigration is the crime being inflicted against immigrants because they are vulnerable and have less ability to enforce their rights. So
That's right.
Actually, they're not the criminals very often. We might get the occasional story that they get to highlight, but the statistics don't show that they're any more likely. If anything, they're less likely to commit crimes because they don't want to be found out as undocumented.
So I want to highlight an example of that exact thing. So a show does have impact, because certainly it impacts the way people think and the way that they interact with their neighbors. A Pike County man has been charged with impersonating immigration officials. He attacked a neighbor that he thought was illegal. He assaulted her and demanded that she provide proof of citizenship to him. And so that is here in Missouri. I imagine there's probably gonna be more things coming. But I also want to point out that not just that, I also just heard this past week that a Mississippi lawmaker has basically copied David Gregory's bill to create bounty hunters and do $1,000 reward to go after undocumented immigrants in the state. So,
and that bill's going to have a hearing today. Just to be clear.
That's right.
But
and all these things are connected, right? Is that
yes.
Is that how you feel? That's how I feel.
It is. Well, and I got to say, like, when you're talking about this bounty hunter concept that they're trying to push now, they're actually trying to empower and embolden more people like this Pike County guy to make choices like that, to go after people themselves and think that they are authorized by the state to do that, to help, that they're helping in the process. But then you've got the pardoning of January 6th rioters, for example, or the treating of Kyle Rittenhouse as a hero by the right in media. What they're trying to do is say, and controlling the police, of course, if they have control of the police and the justice system and the ability to pardon people they want to pardon, what starts happening is they're authorizing people to go out and be vigilantes for their political cause, even if they're not right, even if they're harassing people or killing people that did not do anything wrong. And then they're going to make them free from all consequences for that, maybe even lifted up as heroes in the process. That is again, a terrifying state that they're trying to push through right now. And I think that's what this all connects to, honestly.
That is absolutely the concern. But more specifically here in St. Louis, we saw in committee another big thing that the GOP is focused on, which is crime. And their answer to crime is to take away local control of the St. Louis Police Department, much like they have done in Kansas City. If you are not familiar, the St. Louis Police Department and the Kansas City Police Department used to both be under state control.
Those for 150 years.
That's right. And they are the only major metropolitan areas in the entire country where that has been the case. Now, let's also remember that they also are considered, certainly have been over the last 20, 30 years, some of the most dangerous places in the entire country. Okay. So
Joe,
Sorry,
I got to back up. It's important to understand, though, why for 150 years we were the only two cities in the country that had this situation. And that's because Missouri is a unique state in the country back, what was 150 years ago, the Civil War. We were a state that had people on both sides, right? And that was split on where to land between the Confederates and the Union. And right before the Civil War, literally on the eve of the Civil War, Confederates in Missouri, white supremacists in Missouri, saw that the largest force and arsenal in Missouri was here in St. Louis. But it was controlled largely by people in St. Louis that were left-leaning, we'll say, union-supporting, opposed slavery. And so they decided at the last minute to pass a bill taking over the St. Louis City Police Force and hopefully thereby the arsenal as well, and appointed white supremacists to be in charge of it. I mean, that was the explicit purpose, to prevent people that wanted to protect African Americans and put instead the weaponry and the police in the control of the people that wanted to enslave them and keep them enslaved, right? To use the police to catch slaves. That's why St. Louis became state controlled as a police force. 20 years later, in Kansas City, the reason that the state took over the police force was because the Kansas City population had gone from like 90 Black folks to 9,000 something. And they got worried that they weren't going to be able to control the police anymore, to use them to suppress the rights during Reconstruction of Black people or to go after union power and do union busting. So they took state control of the police then in order to, again, impose white supremacy, essentially, on the people of Kansas City. And of course, then they started running illegal gambling rings because the people that ran the police in Kansas City didn't care about Kansas City. They cared about profiting off of Kansas City and controlling Kansas City. Well, of course, here we are today. And 10 years ago, we managed to get local control back of the St. Louis City Police, of course, notably, while we had a white male mayor. And now here we are on the eve of what looks like potentially a similar sort of conflict nationally, right? And they're saying, we see the two big cities, both with two Black mayors, the only cities around with Black mayors, and they want to make sure they still have control of our police, especially if they start using those police to coordinate with ICE and do other things that the people of St. Louis City don't want to do. It's about that control, and it tying to this pending extreme divide that is happening in how we use law enforcement. That's what this is all about.
Yeah. So I have some video for us to go through of the actual committee hearing, and we can kind of go through and see what they said to justify it and the conversation around it. But before we do that, I do just want to prime the pump a little bit, I guess, as they say, to also remind people one of the biggest things that they bring up as a reason to do this is because of the crime in St. Louis. And first, let's point to Kansas City. The crime in Kansas City is not better. This hasn't worked in Kansas
No, actually,
City.
their crime rates have gone up the last several years,
That's
while
right.
St. Louis's
Whereas
have gone down, and they've been under state control, and we've had local control.
that's exactly the point. I
Right.
think, you mentioned it's like 12 years ago, St. Louis got their local control back. Well, at least over the last a few years, every year that Mayor Tashara Jones has been mayor, we have seen a drop in crime. And in fact, homicides, for example, last year dropped to the lowest number in 10 years.
Mhm.
Now, to be fair and balanced, nationally, violent crime has also dropped. And in some areas, that drop has been greater than in St. Louis. And even though homicides have dropped, the number of shootings last year did increase slightly. But again, overall violent crime was down.
Significantly.
Fact remains, crime in St. Louis is down, and that is a trend. But that's not compelling to the Missouri GOP, and we're gonna look at why. So let me start this, and like I said before, let me know if you want to stop. I got a couple areas for us to talk through.
Thanks.
First, it's so much I want to tackle what you said. First, you said under local control, these were the bloodiest years. That's not true. I've been a resident of St. Louis since 1982, other than going to undergrad and law school. Do you remember 1993 through 1996?
Yeah, the crack epidemic.
Those were some bloody years. And did the state have control then?
Yes.
So my thing is, and I want to ask you, what's so different between state control and what do we have now? How will that directly decrease public safety?
Well, one, I think
increase, I'm sorry.
Historically, if you look at the last 12 years, crime is definitely higher than the 100 years prior per capita. And so that's indisputable.
Indisputable.
Okay, so I'm gonna stop that.
Indisputable.
Yeah, indisputable. And we're gonna
except by statistics.
Yeah, they're gonna talk about the numbers and where he gets his numbers versus reality. But also let's point to the fact that he's saying the average over the last 100 years for local control. When come on, that's got to be the most dishonest way to look at statistics for something like this.
And to Representative Anderson, that was Marlon Anderson, great guy from St. Louis City, that was asking the questions there. He's pointing out, I also grew up in St. Louis City and have lived here my entire life other than undergrad. And sure enough, 93 was the highest rate of homicides that this city has ever had. The 90s and the 80s were really tough times for crime around here, and that was under state control. I think it's also notable that part of what a lot of folks believe, part of the problem that we had with crime then was the drug war and the criminalization of poverty, and the discriminatory use of very strict laws against poor people and Black people specifically. And that created cycles of poverty, cycles of crime, and crime got more violent, not less, right? I think that is an interesting comparison to the kind of things they're trying to do now, to use the police, again, controlled by the state, an outside force, as more of an occupying force, criminalizing the folks that live in St. Louis, as opposed to protecting and serving the folks of St. Louis. Moving that direction is going to make crime worse, not better.
And okay, now we're going to keep going because there's going to be more I know you want to talk about, but we're going to get to some of it, I think. So let's keep going.
Crime statistics the last 12 years are higher than they were prior to 2012 if you take an annual average.
How can we say that when you don't believe in the crime statistics in the city of St. Louis?
With statistics,
where are we getting these from?
I would love better crime statistics. There's a few bills out there to try to resolve the crime statistic issue, but with the statistics I have.
So just stopping real quick so people understand, one of the big arguments with the Missouri GOP is that they don't believe the crime data that's coming out from the FBI, from all of the normal sources that are used to identify.
Including the St. Louis Metropolitan Police Department's own crime statistics.
That's right.
And they're saying it's those police that want to go to state control, but they don't trust their statistics.
Yeah, but they're going to get to this.
Available. It's undisputable.
So
undisputable.
So where do you get your statistics from? Because I want to get them from where you got them from, because you don't believe what the prosecutor says, what the FBI says, what the Department of Justice says. So where do you get your statistics from?
I get them from a variety of sources.
But you believe those?
Name one.
What's the authority where you get them from? I just want to know that. Yeah, because you're saying all these statistics, but you don't believe the ones that This administration, I'm
The
assuming,
police
is bringing up.
department has them. They used to be the gold standard in issuing these crime data, and that shifted a few years ago. They just put out their crime data. KSDK asked them for that crime data, and they wanted to charge them $14,000 to get the crime data through Sunshine request.
For the
So-
state to get upset about that is so ironic.
Robust
Yeah.
discussion about crime data. But again, I think we're missing the point. This was never a crime plan.
Okay, we're going to get into that.
This
but
was never a crime plan.
That's right. So, but first, I just want to point out, right? Like, he doesn't name where he's getting his data from.
No, in
because
fact, the only one he
doesn't have
does
any
name,
data.
again, is the police departments, which he then says, but those aren't right. We can't actually trust those because you're right. Those say the same thing that you, a resident and representative of St. Louis City, are saying, and that crime
That's
is
exactly
going
right.
down.
And I think we're going to get to it, but I think what you're going to find later is that really it's all anecdotal. It's
Right.
He's talked to cops.
Right.
He's talked to people who
Yes.
don't feel safe in the city. So it's all anecdotal. But
Which is a
gonna-
legitimate feeling for people to have. Like, there's no question. There is too much crime. Folks feel unsafe. And if you've been a victim of serious crime, you feel especially unsafe. And no statistics are going to change that, how you feel. But we still, as policymakers, have to be looking at actual data.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the point,
If you want
Joe,
policy
is
to
what he
actually
just
be
said. It's not actually a crime bill.
Yeah. So I'm going to rewind this just slightly.
About crime data. But again, I think we're missing the point. This was never a crime plan.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't think this is going to be the silver bullet that turns St. Louis into the safest place in America. What this is about is taking politics out of policing and creating a foundation of a police department that's been completely decimated. So it's not going to change it overnight, but it's the start of, again, building a foundation.
You mentioned earlier.
Okay.
Yeah, thank
So,
you.
yeah, obviously, I have a feeling you want to talk about that.
Yeah,
But obviously,
so-
it's not about crime. It's about a bunch of other stuff that isn't
First of
part
all,
of it.
I'll get back to taking politics out of policing, but he also just said the crumbling foundation of policing that has happened now. What blows my mind here is later in this hearing, they talk to the police chief and they praise him like crazy about how great a job he's done since he came in, how they're doing a good job. The police are running well. The police union head who is pushing for this bill says, yeah, actually things are going really well right now. We have all these things happening. We've gotten these pay raises, et cetera. We're just worried about what happens if there's a different mayor.
Sure.
What happens after this mayor? Well, okay. Every time they make a new argument, they then completely deny that argument. Just like that. Like, yes, it's about undermining or this destroyed utterly foundation of the police force. And then 10 minutes later, they say, except actually the police force is doing great. It's all a lie.
So,
Okay,
let's
but
get to that.
politics out of policing,
yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Because-
we're going to. I want you to talk about that. We're going to get to a clip where we're going to talk about it.
Okay,
So
all right.
let's save
I'll
it
wait.
just a hair.
That this part of this was to take the politics out of it.
Oh.
And I'm wondering, and I probably have a couple questions on this, but if you're having the governor appoint these people to this board, and he currently right now is not, I guess, a member of the party that is predominantly in charge of St. Louis City right now. as far
They're
as
so
the mayor's
polite,
office and
though.
everything
But
else.
okay.
I
How
know.
does that take politics out of it, other than just sort of switching it over to the other party to sort of take control in an area where they currently don't have control?
No, it's a good question, and thank you for it. I don't think you ever can take politics out of policing. I don't think it removes it completely, but it definitely lessens it. You're going to have 4 citizens that, yes, are appointed by the mayor, appointed by the governor. And quite frankly, if you look at the governor appointments that's happened in our area, they have been Democrats.
Okay.
Mhm.
So he's going to keep going. We're going to get back to it, but I just want to point out, yes, they keep highlighting that they're citizens.
Mhm.
The requirement is simply that the people appointed on this board have 3 years of residency in the city. That's it. And then they are unelected bureaucrats chosen by the governor.
Chosen by and accountable to, ultimately, the governor.
That's exactly right. Whereas one seat, so there's 4 unelected bureaucrats chosen by somebody outside of the city of St. Louis, and 1 member from St. Louis, and that is the mayor.
Right.
So if you're doing any math, right, 1 out of 5 votes does not have any kind of control at all. It's
and for this idea that, well, because they live there, they must represent St. Louis's interests is absurd. I mean, to suggest that they'd be accountable and in line with the majority of St. Louis's beliefs about what's best for us. I just want to imagine if we were to go into a rural county in Missouri when Democrats have control of the state government and said, we're going to replace your police force and your schools, by the way, that's a separate topic, but with people that we appoint, and we get to pick. But don't worry, they're going to live there. And we go find what they consider to be the most woke, liberal leftist that lives in their community. I'm just exaggerating, of course, to a point there. Does that count as us giving them local control? Would they believe that then? Yeah. Or would they say, no. We need to at least have a say over who those people are, right? Yeah. Because there are lots of different people in St. Louis with lots of different beliefs. And just because they're from here doesn't mean they're in line with the views of the community.
No doubt. And I want to get back to this because we have a small amount of time. So let's keep going.
Gabe Gore.
Oh, actually, one last question, just to make sure that I understand. So he says that that Parson, at least, did put a Democrat in as the lead prosecutor in the city of St. Louis. But can you just explain to me how he knows they're Democrats? Because
I think that's a fair question. I think there are a lot of folks in St. Louis that, especially for the last 30 years, everybody runs as a Democrat if they're going to run for office in St. Louis. So there's a wide range of what Democrat means. These
would be citizens, though, Pete. So they wouldn't be running. So they wouldn't have to declare party affiliation, right?
But I was going to say, even Gabe Gore, like in most of our elections in St. Louis now are now nonpartisan elections too. So even our elected officials in most of our offices don't have to declare a party at all. So is it really just now he's going to go and ask them their party label before he decides whether to appoint them? Because I don't think that's what's happening here.
And is it realistic if they get appointed by the governor and then they just say they're Democrats to appease? Like, what actual evidence do we have? You know what I mean? So I just don't understand why this is supposed to.
No, that doesn't make me feel any better. I'll tell you that.
Yeah. Okay. Anyway.
I'm with Melissa Price Smith. So I think it's the way, again, to give citizen control of the department and get politics the least involved as possible in policing. The last thing I want to see is another incident where defunding the police is cool again, and this happens again, because it's completely decimated the city for the last 6-7 years. We're still recovering from it.
Why do you think the governor would appoint somebody better to sort of govern over the city of St. Louis other than people that the city of St. Louis elected themselves?
Well, the board makeup is one. The mayor will be on the board. Yeah. The governor picks an appointee, and there's a new structure to this board. And then there's a panel of 6 the governor picks from that are put up by the POA, ESOP, and the mayor on this panel.
So we're going to touch on that real quick just so people understand. What he's talking about is that is 2 police unions and the mayor. And in this legislation, the governor is under no obligation to choose any of the mayor's selections.
Or one of the 2 police unions.
So just so we're clear.
So they will be citizens selected by other citizens of the city and elected officials. So it's not completely what the original bill was a few years ago.
I think that this is going to improve crime in St. Louis. Like, who are these magical people that are going to come in and be appointed that are going to clean up the streets? I mean, I guess I don't understand the connection. I mean, it's obviously not working in Kansas City. Like, what is the plan for them to do to sort of fix this situation?
Well, again, it's not a crime plan, but I think one morale will be boosted insanely, and I think we'll see more recruits.
That's a familiar tune.
Recruits back to the police department. 2, they will fall under the constitutional amendment that Kansas City's on that mandates funding for the department. It will require staff requirements and funding requirements for the police. So I think.
So people understand, to explain that means that under the new law, they would fall under the same requirements as Kansas City. And if you were paying attention, the last election, we voted that 25% of the budget for Kansas City must go to their police. No matter what, it's an unfunded mandate. They have no choice. So that's what St. Louis would be under as well. Am I understanding that correctly, Peter?
That is correct. And I will say, over 50% of our budget right now in St. Louis City goes to public safety. Now, that's not entirely the police department. The police department's budget has gone up under this. Pay has gone up. All these things have gone up. But keep in mind, if they then go cut all our taxes and we don't have property taxes anymore that we can rely on, like personal property taxes, or we don't have an income tax, they want to get rid of our earnings tax in St. Louis City. They've tried to do that. They want to take away all our revenue, but then they're saying, but we still have to spend all our money on police specifically. That means all the other things that a city has to do, that St. Louis actually has to do more of than everywhere else in the state, because all the burdens get shifted over to us, like addressing homelessness, like all the roads and bridges that we have to maintain when, if we were in outstate, roads that serve the same number of people or fewer would get paid for by the state. All these things, we don't get to decide our budgets to go to them, because now the state is telling us where we have to spend our money first.
Yes, and much of that is connected to public safety, as you mentioned, which we're about to talk about.
Again, it's not a crime plan, but it will build a stronger foundation for this police department.
I just got to say, though, the number of times he has said it's not a crime plan, when his entire introduction of the bill and the way that they lead the bill every time is, look at how bad crime is in St. Louis. We have to do something about it. And this bill is how we're going to do it. He said it's going to be a model public safety bill for the rest of the country. But it's not about crime.
Right. Now, I am going to, because you just missed the very beginning of it.
Sorry.
So we talked about public safety. This rep, whose name I can't remember now, you probably know, who is also from, she may be from Kansas.
Is it Lakeisha Bosley about to talk?
No, it's not Lakeisha.
We'll
but
see.
She says your definition of public safety
Oh.
happens to be different than my definition
that's
and
Kimberly
our
Ann
definition
Collins.
in the city.
Different from our definition of public safety, and how we view things in our life and perspectives is totally different from how you may view things. And so there has been intentional investment with, of course, transportation and infrastructure, just recently 40 mil through RAMS, through the RAMS funded bill, housing and business development, which we all view these things as public safety. You have total investment in North City, St. Louis, and parts of South City, St. Louis, and the southeastern portion of the city of St. Louis that have been neglected years before this mayor and this administration even took this office. So I would be remiss if I didn't say that there was some intentional strides to reduce violence. Recently, our mayor rolled out some facts. You may not believe them. I do. I live in the city of St. Louis, born and raised 1992. And homicides have reduced by 50% versus the numbers of last year. I also believe that there have been intentional investments in ARPA funds to support community youth and community-based violence intervention programs.
And sorry, just really quick, you can't fake homicide numbers.
Right.
They're like, you can't fake the dead people. So just so we're clear.
In the city of St. Louis. So when you say that there is no effort to support public safety in our city, it absolutely is. Public safety is public health, and public health is in everything that we
Amen.
do. So we live, eat, breathe public safety and public health. Sometimes it doesn't feel like we're able to feel it and see it, but I mean, the numbers are going down and you don't want to believe it.
There are arguments over who chooses what statistics to believe and which statistics not to believe. There are comments as far as definitions of public safety. But speaking is just a...
This is a Republican, by the way, who doesn't live in St. Louis.
Not looked up.
Because none of them do.
Someone who doesn't care to take time to define public safety. I will tell you this. This bill aims to fix the status quo. And the status quo is pretty simple. We don't need to know statistics to know what
we feel safe or not.
Oh, God.
We don't need to argue about the definition of public safety to know if we feel safe or not.
We that don't live in St. Louis City.
We need to know the definition of public safety to see that businesses are no longer coming to our city.
Not
Businesses
true.
are leaving our city. People are leaving our city. I don't live in St. Louis, but I can tell you the perspective from, well, you may shrug at that, but here's the thing. St. Louis has a pretty good reputation around the state. The reputation is don't go there. Crime is terrible. That's fact.
It's actually not a fact. It's vibe. It's just all vibes.
Well, he said it's a fact that that's the reputation. And
okay, sure. Fine.
Right.
Fine. Yeah. But that's the point. None of this is actually rooted in actual facts. Right. It's just vibes. It's just,
but I also want to stress, Joe, like this guy, and they talk about this a lot. They're talking about businesses leaving St. Louis City. They're talking about people leaving St. Louis City. And there is some truth to that, right? No doubt. Right now, I can also point to a whole lot of businesses and people that have come to St. Louis. But what I'm getting annoyed most by here is these guys represent rural Missouri.
Right.
And 44 rural counties in this state, they've not only lost population in the last decade, they have actually had negative economic growth compared to the rest of the state, which has had positive economic growth as a whole, thanks largely to our cities that are economic engines. We keep growing. And guess what? Where they represent, their counties are actually shrinking. People are actually leaving them, and they're getting left behind. And yet they're saying that that's the reason they're going to come take over St. Louis City because what? The counties that they're running are doing so well, but they're not trying to take over those counties, right? Like,
I think I have a sneaking suspicion it may be because, and it might be evidenced later, is that they actually want to move to St. Louis. They just don't want it to be Blue City.
You're going to talk about Senator?
The bill aims to fix that. And if people in opposition of this bill, I will just tell you, the status quo isn't working. If people are leaving, if businesses are leaving, and people do not feel safe there, and people do not want to go there, the status quo is not good. This bill aims to fix the status quo. I like this bill, and I'm appreciative of Representative Chris for bringing this forward. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So, Chris, we talked about an amendment where basically if we go into state control, the mayor can still pick the police chief, and you were opposed to that, correct?
Correct.
But we will still be under state control, and that will boost morale, and officers will come in. But why are you opposed to not letting the mayor still keep the opportunity to pick their own police chief?
Well, that's the whole intention of the board is to pick the chief of police of their department to run their department. I mean, you're taking away one of the number one authorities that the board has is to pick the police chief.
That's fair. I have to do this really quick. I don't want to cut you off. You know, you're my buddy, my man. And also, we were just in Ballpark Village this fall. Did you feel safe?
I did.
Thank you. And also, you said people are not moving to the city of St. Louis. We have a senator from Jefferson County who just purchased a $1.8 million house to reside in the city of St. Louis. Thank you, gentlemen. People
right in Central West End.
But then you said, and then he said as well, that, oh, well, this isn't a public safety bill. This isn't going to solve.
Okay, so before we get into this is now the leader of one of the police unions who came to talk about the bill.
Who loves the police chief, by the way. And they keep saying, all of them say the police chief is great. But the whole point of this bill is supposedly, as he just said, to make it that the mayor can't appoint the police chief, even though they love the police chief that the mayor appointed.
Yeah. And so I wanted to include this because this briefly is going to touch on the other reason that they cited for this bill, which is to improve morale. Okay.
Safety issue. So, is what you're saying, and I guess what I'm hearing is that it will bring more police. We'll want more police. We'll recruit them more. We'll bring them more here. And I guess my question is, what evidence do we have that is going to happen? Like, is that happened in Kansas City? Have they been able to recruit more police officers? Other cities that have done something like this? I mean, I guess where's the evidence that is going to bring police officers to the city?
Well, I mean, the idea is that once you stabilize the police department and people see that, oh, this department is stable, they'll want to come here. Now, hiring is a problem across the country, right? We're having issues hiring policemen. For a decade, policemen have been villainized across the country for some reasons that are true, but a lot of them for reasons that aren't. And
it's the head of the police union.
Policemen do wrong things, but the beating that my profession has taken over a decade we've lost
what a word to use.
Policemen now.
The beating
So
that the
all
police
those
have
kids that
taken.
were 16, 11 to 16, 10 years ago, they don't want to be police because all they've heard over the last decade is how bad of people we are. Good, how are you today?
Or we've seen people beaten by police.
So just to the point, I think in case it was lost by folks, they talked about it more at length. I didn't include it, but I just wanted to make the point. The question is asked, has this worked anywhere else? Like, has this resulted in a bunch of police coming back? Has this resulted
It's
in
not been done anywhere else. States don't have control of police forces elsewhere.
Except except in Kansas City.
Right.
Where it hasn't worked.
Correct.
And the other point is there are some I guess you could say like portions of this where some police have committees like this that actually run their police departments.
Oh yeah, but they're locally controlled.
Right,
like St. Louis County. They're still appointed by their county exec.
Yes, exactly. And then there are also some very small communities where the police department is run or controlled by the state across the country. But again, very small.
But that's because they don't choose to have the resources to support their own police force. I mean, that's a local decision to do that.
But again, the overarching point is
no
matter what way you look at it, no matter how you slice it, what they're trying to do hasn't worked anywhere.
No.
So,
well, and honestly, this argument about it's going to suddenly bring more police officers, it's the same argument they used a few years ago when they pushed the bill as their big priority to make it where the police in St. Louis City no longer had to live in St. Louis City to be police officers here. And we fought this and said, like, no, we think it's important that if you're policing here, you are actually a resident here. Otherwise, we start having a risk of an occupying force. People that don't live here policing our community rather than people from our community protecting and serving our community. Right now, don't get me wrong. There can be great police officers that are coming in to do that. Sure. But they said that's going to fix our recruiting problem. That's going to fix our vacancies. Well, obviously it hasn't, or we wouldn't be here with them making the same claim on this bill, because our vacancies have not improved. Our recruiting has not gone up just because we could bring people in. It just means now we have fewer police that live here.
And it's a risk reward thing, because if you think about one of the things that they've said that again is not included, they said is a very important part of policing is the relationship with the local community.
Yes.
And what do you think the impact of something like this is going to be when the local community feels like they don't have self-determination?
Yeah, the police don't even live here,
self-government.
and we have no voter accountability for the people that are in charge of the police, because even when we as a city overwhelmingly vote against who is in office in the governorship, they are still in charge of our police. So how are we supposed to hold them accountable for anything?
Yep. Okay. So let's keep going.
So who will pay for it? Will the state pay for it, or will the city pay for it? How would it be funded?
The funding would come from the city.
The city will still pay even if we have state control?
Yeah, the mayor's on the board. The citizens are on the board. It's not like the state's in control of the police department. The citizens and the city of St. Louis are.
So no funds will be allocated from the budget. I'm sure there was some, but the city will pay
I do not know. I know there's some things under state control with the Attorney General's office, but the Amendment 4 that passed guarantees funding to the police department.
So the city will still be paying for it.
Yes.
Taxation without representation. Thank you, gentlemen. Good.
So before you hear the snappy response from the Republicans, I do want to point out that's not what I would say, right? I would say
an unfunded mandate.
An unfunded mandate, but it's also not completely wrong. But let's hear the quick response, because this gentleman's arm in the top left there, he was
so excited. He was so excited
to respond.
Proceed. Permission to inquire. Proceed. Good afternoon, sir. Great seeing you again. The third go around. Appreciate being here. Great bill. Great day at the Capitol. I believe he said taxation without representation.
That's Benny.
That's what I heard. Yes, but didn't you just say that folks from the city of St. Louis will be on that board, correct?
Yes.
So they're going to be representing, correct?
Correct.
That's all I need to hear. Thanks, sir.
That's all I needed to hear.
Because if you're from the city, you apparently represent everyone in the city, even if nobody in the city voted for you and the person that appointed you, they voted against. That is the most absurd argument ever.
I think we've beat that one to death, but at best it's token representation at best that allows them to, by the letter, check the box.
Sure. Either way, it's an unfunded mandate.
Either way, it's an unfunded mandate, and there's lots of problems, I think. So lastly, I just wanted to give Mayor Tashara Jones, who came to this committee, the opportunity to just talk a little bit about the current situation in St. Louis about the bill.
In the city of St. Louis, and it's lower than pre-pandemic levels, and the number of homicides this year was the lowest in more than a decade. The decrease in homicides in 23 was the largest drop in homicides in the past 90 years. 4 years ago, less than 40% of the cases were solved. Today, we're clearing nearly 70%, far outpacing the national average. And we've been able to do that through good police work and improving community trust in law enforcement. Overall, violent crime is down 15% from 23 and down 31% compared to 2022. Through engagement with our youth, we've managed to decrease the number of juvenile shooting victims by 6% year over year and 46% compared to 2022. Under state control in 2006, St. Louis was the most dangerous city in the country and ranked second most dangerous on the eve of switch to local control in 2013. Right now, St. Louis is no longer considered in the top 10 most dangerous cities.
Okay. So I just want to really quickly address that last one. So she said we are no longer listed as one of the top 10 most dangerous cities because Republicans did push back on that. But I want to clarify. She says we're not listed as one of the top 10 most dangerous cities.
Right.
So there was a recent report that came out that listed cities as far as overall danger. So it's not just crime. It's also natural disasters and roadways and all kinds of things. And yes, St. Louis is actually listed significantly farther down the list. If you just rate crime only, the city is still, I think, number 10 on.
I will say
it's significantly, hold on real quick, significantly better than where we were. There was a time not very long ago where St. Louis was the most dangerous city when listed only for crime. So to go from number 1 down to 10, like the progress is there. Why are we trying to mess with a good trajectory that we've been on?
It's also important just to, I don't think it's important to focus too much on that ranking because we're being compared against cities with very different situations. And our geographic divide between the city and the county is really unique in this country. And it does make it where our statistics aren't totally fair for the city because we are a city that serves a much bigger metropolitan area. And if you go by our whole metropolitan area, our stats look a lot more like most other cities. But theirs get to be spread out across that whole region. And ours is stuck in our area that has the most concentrated poverty, also the highest increase in the number of people that are actually here during the day. Or even for tourism and other things at night. Like our population doesn't actually reflect the number of people that are even here. And, when 40% of our crime in St. Louis City, 40% of it, the victim or the suspect is not from St. Louis City, kind of demonstrates that too, that our crime stats actually reflect a larger population. But that's something we don't need to get into too deeply. I think it's also worth noting when we were debating this bill last year, we were looking at the crime statistics across our state, and Springfield actually has a higher rate of being a victim of violent crime than St. Louis does. And yet they're not trying to take over Springfield's police force either. Because again, it's not a crime bill.
It's not a crime bill. Didn't you hear that? I thought that was made pretty clear.
I did. Well, and I think she did a good job responding to a lot of that. But I also think there was one other thing that we didn't talk about in here, but the head of the police union focused a lot of time at one point about not wanting the Board of Aldermen to have any control over the police in St. Louis City, that they were passing ordinances that the police didn't like. Well, the ordinance he referred to, he actually kind of lied about it. And he said that it was going to make it where they had to get board approval in the middle of an investigation if they wanted to do surveillance on somebody. Well, that's not true. In the middle of an investigation, it still works the normal way. They have to go get a warrant with a judge. That's how it works. But what they did pass a bill doing, and the bill he was referring to, made it so that if they want to use a new technology, a new type of surveillance, they had to first have a public hearing. So the board knew about it, essentially, so the public knew about it and approved of it. This happened because they wanted to get all these spy drones, surveillance drones, from a private company that was offering to do them for the police. The private company was going to have all of the data stored itself, have possession of all of this information, right? Think TikTok, right? This private for-profit company wanted to have possession of all of this surveillance from their drones that they operate around the city. And our Board of Aldermen went, wait, we're not sure we want that. We need to have hearings about that. And the police were like, well, we don't need your support to do this. And the aldermen passed a bill and said, yes, you do. Well, if that's really, and he's saying that's one of the examples of the real reason they want state control. They want state control so a for-profit company can come in and do surveillance that the city of St. Louis residents don't know about, don't want. At a time right now when we're talking about police becoming more and more of a surveillance state in order to impose right-wing views on a city that doesn't appreciate them, I think that says a lot about what this bill is really about compared to the things that they actually spent their time talking about.
Yep. And I think we're going to have to leave it there because you got to go. I got to go. And I'm sure the folks got to go. So real quick, 30 seconds, because I want to start ending the show with this. We want to start giving something that people can do to get involved here in St. Louis, or a call to action, or in Missouri, in Kansas City, wherever you are, some call to action. I'm going to start. So I'm going to suggest, with all the discussion about immigration and things going on, if you go to ilrc.org, that's the Immigrant Legal Resource Center. There are some great resources there if you want to find out ways that you can support the immigrant community in the state of Missouri and across the country.
I'm sticking with immigration too right now. We've got these hearings in the Senate today. At the state Senate about the bounty hunter bill and a couple other bills. I think their bill numbers, Senate Bill 58 and Senate Bill 72. I'd say contact your senator at the very least, but also contact the senators that are on this and let them know that that is not good for the people of Missouri. If you're curious for more info about it, you can go to my Facebook page. I did post just last night an action alert, which has a link that can make it even easier for you to contact people if you don't want to make the phone calls yourself. So I'd say take action and be in touch with your elected officials.
Okay, that's Peter Meredith. I'm Joe Zahn. I hope you'll join us again in the future as we discuss important bits of news in Missouri politics and dive deeper into the biggest issues facing our state. If you have thoughts on any topics we should cover, if you want to see us discuss other things in the future, leave us a comment, send us a note on all the major social media platforms you can find us. Just search for either Pete Meredith or Joe Zahn or What's Up with Mo podcast. Subscribe, follow, share all the things, and thank you for spending a little time with us today.
We'll see y'all next week.